Okay, so here we are at the start of the drilling project following the arrival of the dampers, which I'm using as spares in case all should go wrong, and the rattle gun, which I believe is necessary to get this job done. Now, forgive me if in this video we're doing I'll repeat myself. I do that anyway, but I've made this video in separate chunks and probably repeating myself, so bear with me. So there's the bike, jacked up, front wheels off, and as you can see I've put it on the jack, and then I put wood blocks underneath it as a fail-safe, really, just in case, you know, you never know. As I said in a previous video, I think if the if the bike were to just slowly go forward and then keel over, that would be a bit of a shame. So I always put wood underneath and test it too, actually. It's enough to support it if the jack ever gave up. They do sometimes, don't they? So this next shot here shows a very disconsolate looking headlamp, looking very sad on a bike. I hate it looking like this, I've said this before, but it's a necessary evil. So I've got one of the fork tubes out. I took them both out, which reduces the weight at the front end, obviously, when it's perched on jacks and bits of wood. So that's a good thing. Now, the next shot here shows the special tool fabricated using Frankenwelder and bits out of the cable drum. So there's the big long rod. There is the damper tube without its white plastic collar around the side of it, because that's the new one. And you can see I'm holding it in front of the large nut, which is so rusted onto that threaded bar that I didn't even need to weld it on. And you'll see that I've had to obviously weld the corners just to add a little bit extra on. It was just a little bit too small on the corners, I thought, and I ground it off with a little grinder, bench grinder. Now here it is slotting in. That's as deep as it will go. Now I'm sure the special tool, which is 75 quid, has got loads and loads and loads of corners on it. I mean, I'm using a big hex nut. So you've only got 7, haven't you? You've only got 7 faces. Is it 7? Yeah. So I'm sure the special tool has probably got loads and fits into every single little cornery bit on that damper tube. However, it's 75 quid. Which is okay if you're taking that particular damper tube out day in, day out for millions of bikes. It'd be one-off use, wouldn't it? So this tool, I made it so that it's as good a fit as I can get in that damper. And, as this picture shows, success. It got it out. There it is, the damper of fork number 1. You'll see it's got the white plastic bit around the top. It's got the rebound spring, which is a progressive spring and needs to be the right way up. As you can see from that picture, that's how it came out. And that was the first one, which I felt very pleased about. And I've posted what the process was like in the video next that has the commentary on it. So if you watch this video till the end, you'll see how far I've got and what I think. Okay, so this now shows the damper rod, the first one, out of fork tube number 1. You can see it's got the rebound spring and it's got tiny little hole in it. The one that everybody's been talking about. And that pointy end of it, the one with the threaded end, there's a kind of donut shaped plastic thing that's still in the bottom of the fork tube that slots into. Now this next bit here, if you come round here, I'll show you. You can see there's sorry about that. That's the end of the tool, Franken-welded and ground down with Bride of Frankenstein, the bench grinder, which is about a similar standard to Frankenwelder. They're well matched, but they do the job. So there it is, ground off at the ends. Okay, after some use of the rattle gun and the Franken welded special tool, here are both the dampers out, the originals, with their rebound springs. And the reason that there was such one of them was a swine to get out is that, because if you look, there's blue Loctite on that thread. That was quite chewed up, look, and that's with the correct size hex. So I'm going to replace that with one of my stainless steel ones. The other one was fine, came straight out. The first one took a good 15 seconds of rattling. Each of those bolts has got a copper gasket to keep the oil in. So I'm now about to use this to enlarge that. The project is proceeding. The difficult bit, well, I think, is over, which is getting those blasted rods out. So I'll crack on. So here we are with the original damper tubes out the bike, which I've now drilled. Now the first thing I'm going to point out, which we've been talking about collectively, about there being a 3mm hole in the damper rod. That isn't quite true. It is true, there is a hole, but there's also another one opposite. There's 2 holes in it. They are very, very small, and I would estimate, let's have a look. Let's get a little tape measure on it. Yeah, it's 3mm. And there's 2 of them. So that's the first thing. There's not just one hole. So I've drilled out each side. That's an 8mm drill bit. I've beveled them slightly. I'm going to get the swarf off in a minute. And then I'm going to put those back in. These ends sit with like a ring at the bottom. So you've got a rebound spring and there's a little spacery thing that's still in the fork tube at the moment. So that's what they look like post drilling. When you buy the new dampers, you obviously don't get the springs and you don't get this either. So I'm going to put the originals back in because they've come out so well and they're drilled. One hole, in my opinion, will be enough. I'm not going to drill the other side. I don't want to weaken it. I mean, that is a massive hole compared to the original one, and I'm sure it will remove all damping from that rod. So time to clean all the swarf off and get these back in. Now these copper gaskets that the Allen bolts go on, the Allen bolts that go at the bottom of the fork sliders to hold the dampers in place. Now those copper rings are obviously, they're like a brake banjo union. They're to keep the damping fluid in. Now I always sandpaper them, glass, with a bit of emery paper. So I've put them on a wood block and I've rubbed them up and down a few times because they do get damaged, they do get dinted, scored. So that's them post a little bit of a rubbing up and down on sandpaper. Now here's the fork tube, upside down. That's how you would use it. You'd put your feet on the little crossbar at the bottom and then operate your rattle gun. That's if you take my advice and use one. And you would put your feet on that rod and operate from the top and take that bolt out. This is the next picture, shows the Allen bolt removal, the Allen key. And I mentioned this later in the video. I've had to grind off the shoulder because it just didn't quite go far enough in. It did go in and it did engage with the bolt, but it needed to be about 4mm longer, I think, to really get in there. So I didn't want to risk chewing anything up. And maybe I've been a bit over attentive about this, but I think I was right, because that first one was such a swine to get out, and I think I was right to be cautious. So there you go, ground the shoulder off it a bit. I'd advise doing that, or buying a longer one if one exists. Okay, so here's the 2 forks on the ground. They've now got the drilled damper rods in. They've got the newly sandpapered and cleaned up copper washers and the bolts put back in. And there's the very sad looking bike with the headlamp again, poor thing, with the wood chocks underneath it. So do excuse that helicopter and an ice cream van. I think they must have known I was recording. Can you hear it? I think they're taking aerial shots of my bike. Yeah, so there it is on its blocks, and tucked in the middle of that lot is the hydraulic jack. So the forks are now done, emulators, all the YSS kit is now back in. Okay, so here's the next picture, which shows the bike with everything back together. Wheels are on, and I thought I'd just recap and point out a few things that I think are essential for this job. The first thing, obviously, as I've rattled on about, forgive the pun, is the rattle gun. But this is the special tool there. So that's this big nut. I think a bit of care taken, unless you pay 75 quid for one. Really, a bit of care taken at that stage to make sure it fits, and then put it upside down like that, feet on the crossbar, invert the fork tube and do it from the top. The rattle gun is absolutely vital. I can't stress it enough. There is no way, I don't know if it's 15 seconds or 30 seconds, it's certainly a long time, it felt like it. There is absolutely no possibility, I don't think, of me removing that other bolt. I think it would have taken heat would have done it, but of course you can't be heating your fork, and especially just tucked right inside that fork slider. Now that, as I said before, 45 quid on eBay, and just well worth having, and I think it would be useful obviously for lots of other jobs. This one it's got two batteries, a charger, did that job, just rattles away, it just keeps banging away at it. I've never used one before. There is the hex tool where I've ground the shoulder off it just to get it to go right into the bolt. It could do with being 4mm longer, but as it was, you know, by grinding that shoulder off with Bride of Frankenwelder, and then that gives you just enough room, just enough length to get in there, fully engage, and allow that rattle gun to do its job. And the next little bit you'll see here is of the front end of the bike. Everything's on. You'll see right now, there you go. Looking slightly less miserable than it did before. And I would stress that in this experiment, everything is going to be the same. Everything. The oil, I bought extra because I knew I'd lose a bit. And the oil's the same. Obviously the YSS kit is the same. So I'll be riding this bike tomorrow. I'm not going to do it now because I'm covered in filth and I need to get tidied up. And I don't think, having done this, it's about 2.5 hours to do, I want to be fully engaged in terms of a test ride. I want to just get on it and test it. I don't want my head clouded with rattle guns and special tools, and as you'll see further on in this little video clip here, I don't want to be distracted by the fact that my block paving is now covered in oil. Yes, so I'm going to have to get the jet washer out at some point. Not very soon. I think we can live with that somehow. A bit of oil, look. Oops a daisy. Yes, there it is, look. Looks like the scene of a murder. The murder of the old fork damper. So everything about the test will be the same. It'll be consistent. I'm going to go down the same route. I'll do the same speeds wherever possible. Possibly go a bit faster with the dampers having been drilled, because as people have commented, it's at higher speed that it tends to
if you're not drilled, that it tends to be a bit bumpier and not as good as it could be. So what I will do is I will take it out on exactly the same run, maybe a bit faster over some of the bumps. As you can see, I'm obsessed by that rattle gun because I've just gone and zoomed in on it again. Talk about harping on about something, but wow, I'm committed, absolutely converted to that little gadget. And to be honest, if it lasts 3 jobs, it's worth having. Now you'll notice this shot here shows the adjusters at the top of the YSS with my little finger of fate pointing to them. They are set to exactly the same, 3 turns in. So for the purposes of this experiment, and in order to be able to give a proper assessment, everything is as it was. The only difference are the holes in the dampers. Now I will test this tomorrow. I'm not being a tease, I just don't want to go out now. It's windy, I'm a bit knackered after doing all of this again, and I will do a proper test tomorrow and I'll report back. Hopefully it will be an improvement. I can't imagine it won't be. So in the meantime, everybody out there, take care, ride safe as much as we can, and I will post back tomorrow. It'll just say drilling dampers, the verdict. Bye for now.